Thanks everyone for coming, and we welcome you to this panel with these two inspiring and amazing speakers. The title of the panel is Yemen Portraying Violated Beauty. As you imagine, we are talking about the long-term conflict in Yemen, which is among the least reported and represented by the media around the world. And the reasons are many, not least the extreme difficulty of access for international press, and for locals, the extreme risk of being killed, arrested, threatened by the militias. But once inside, and that's why we are talking about beauty, this country and its people are striking for the extreme beauty of places, landscapes, architecture, faces, and photographing and describing this country at war poses uncommon challenges for reporters. Through the words and the pictures of these two speakers, and especially through their pictures, we're trying to get deeply into three main questions. First of all, how to reconcile the story of the war and its lot of destruction, poverty, deformity, with the sense of objective beauty that this place offers to an observer. And then also, how can we not fall into voyeurism in the face of the necessary representation of malnutrition, for example? And last but not least, how, at the same time, can we not fall into mannerism, privileging only this beauty without giving depth to the cruelty of a conflict that has lasted for now 8 years and shows no signs of ending, or we can say there was a truce, but we don't know how much this truce at least will drag the conflict into peace, as we hope. As I told you, here we have two inspiring speakers, two great photographers. It's my pleasure to present them, also because we planned this panel 3 years ago, and we are very grateful to the Festival of Journalism for being here after all this long-term plan and continue talking about Yemen and its beauty and its problem, unfortunately. So on my left side, there's Lorenzo Tugnoli. Lorenzo Tugnoli is an Italian photographer. He was based in Beirut until some months ago. Lorenzo has covered extensively Middle East and Central Asia, places like Libya, Yemen, Lebanon. I think all of you remember his pictures about the blast in Lebanon more than 1.5 years ago. And for several years, he has been regular contributor to the Washington Post, but he published also with the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Time Magazine, among the others. And Lorenzo, in 2019, won the Pulitzer Prize in feature photography, and then also was nominated for the World Press Photo Story of the Year. On my right side, there's Amir Al-Sharif. Amir Al-Sharif is Yemeni, and she is an award-winning Paris-based Yemeni photographer and artist with 2 decades of visual storytelling experience. We met in Yemen some years ago, and we used to do a lot of things together, even baking, saving cats from the streets, doing a lot of things that we have great memories about. And she was founded for her work by many institutions like World Press Photo Foundation, the Manion Foundation, the Prince Charles Close Fund, the Arab Fund, the Samir Kassir Foundation. And her work were published by National Geographic, the Washington Post, the Guardian, Los Angeles Reviews of Book, and so on. And now, Amira, with her 5-year French talent passport for artistic and cultural professionals, also launched a Paris-based company for her art practice. So actually, she's living in Paris and she's on her personal business. So before starting asking questions to Amira first, Amira has a special project that she made for our panel. This is a video essay, kind of series of visual dialogues that testify what means an ugly war into a beautiful country, her beloved Yemen. And the problem, the problems that she underlined in this project is how much it's difficult to separate the topic of violated beauty from the reality of human rights violations and war crimes, beauty and violations, and the crimes that coexist. So this series of visual dialogues testify what is an ugly war in a beautiful country, and that's what Amira says, ugly war because military campaigns of terror that have targeted this land, the culture, the history, the lives, and the soul, like Yemeni people don't exist. So feelings of violated beauty lead to feelings of non-existence, and in the case of Yemen, non-existence means humanitarian catastrophe. Now we can watch the video that Amira prepared for us.
Fleeing Yemen over 3 years ago, with my hard drives strapped to my body, I longed to free my people from non-existence. At the time, major rights organizations and media outlets called the war on my beloved homeland a forgetting war. The forgotten, the abandoned, did not exist. Yemeni civilians, our culture, our history, our soul, even our suffering, did not exist. Holding our loved ones as warplanes dropped bombs on homes, on hospitals, on schools, on markets, on weddings, on funerals. We did not exist. After 7 years of war, the ongoing humanitarian catastrophe testifies to the devastating civilian toll of the Western world powers choose to arm and assist Saudi and Emirati military campaign of terror. To begin to address the Yemeni situation, we need the true representation of Yemeni voice and their just issues. Talks about ending the war and the political settlement will only remain dreams if world powers and weapons dealers continue to arm the warring parties. Peace will never come at a time when human rights violations and war crimes happened with impunity. This is an ugly war in a beautiful country.
This is an ugly war in a beautiful country. Thank you, Amira, for this emotional contribution that really breaks our hearts, we can say. I have a question for both of you, and it's the same one, at least, but I guess you could have two different perspectives, you as a local and Lorenzo as a foreign. Yemen is a country well known for its beauty, and this war made significant changes. But the beauty of Yemen, as we saw, still exists and still resists. How you, as photographer, and as a Yemeni photographer, I can say, try to catch this beauty before and also during the war, in terms of visions and also in terms of technique and method choices.
Thank you, Laura. Because we exist, simply, we exist. We exist for Saudis. They can't kill us.
Thank you, Amir. Thank you. Can you tell us something about, we saw beautiful landscapes, the sea, the land, the architecture, women, plants, flowers. This is something that you always portrayed. Can you tell us how you tried also to put your personal touch into your vision of your beloved country?
I'm always looking for light. When I meet people, I'm always trying to show their soul, either in journalism or in art. I think soul is all that matters, and it's maybe for Yemen, it's the hidden, wounded soul. It's the beauty.
So you're always in search for light.
Yeah.
Yes. Lorenzo, when you get into Yemen for the first time, it's true that there is a special, particular light. Each country has its own characteristics. You're just back from Afghanistan, which is another stunning place with a stunning, different but stunning beauty. What catches immediately your senses as photographer, expecting you go into a country in war, maybe you expect something and then you find also beauty, a part of the disruption?
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. I think my perspective, the way I arrive in Yemen is completely different from my colleague. I arrived in Yemen in 2018 because I was there for a job. I went there on assignment for the Washington Post. So my goal was to tell a story about what was happening. 2018 was one of the worst years of the humanitarian crisis, and my work and our work was centered about the humanitarian crisis. So I think when it comes to the idea of beauty, I think it's something I kind of stumbled on. It's not something that I was looking necessarily. I was looking to produce a work of journalism, and of course then you slowly try to explore the country, explore its light. Obviously, it's true, the light is particularly interesting in the place, and I also had an interest to pursue the light there. Of course, one of the things that you do as a photographer, you look at the light and you kind of try to get to the places. You want to photograph the right moment in time. That's not always easy to explain to militiamen that you need to go to the right time, especially to wake them up really early in the morning because you want the blue light. So it's a bit complicated. It's a complicated country. It's a beautiful country. I was definitely shocked by how sweet and nice are the people there, and how difficult is obviously the situation at the same time, but of course for a number of reasons that mostly depend from the people that are in power and not the common people. It's a really difficult country to work in. Especially for a foreigner like me, it's a place where it's really difficult. Well, first of all, it's difficult to get a visa to go into the country. Last time that I was there was last year. It took us more than a year to get a visa. And then once you are inside, it's difficult to move because the country is now divided into two parts, maybe more, let's say two. And so every time you have to go from the north to the south, you need to basically go through a front line or be smuggled in. And actually this is something, I mean, the road between Sana'a and Aden, it's something that I hope in the new ceasefire is gonna improve, but it's always been a real big problem for the people who live there. This is just a little note because one of the many difficulties of the people who live in Yemen, especially in the north, is that there's no basically way to fly out of the northern part of the country. So if you need medical attention outside of the country, you basically need to drive to the south, to Aden, and then fly out. And to Aden or to Mareb, anyway, so you need to kind of cross, and there is a really difficult road between Sana'a and Aden, and many people actually have to go through this road. So it's a difficult place to work in, because obviously there is a complicated political situation, and especially in the north, there is a lot of restriction about the work of journalists. And I mean, you are working with a minder, that is a person from the government who's always coming with you and is checking what you're doing, and you cannot even leave your hotel in Sana'a without him. And so a lot of the pictures that you see here were basically taken in kind of like an environment where there was a lot of supervision. And maybe we can ask how it is for a local to work there. And my impression is it's even more hard.
Thanks, Lorenzo, for bringing us into the country, also explaining how it's possible to get in for a foreign, how complex and strong is the pressure of the control of the militias. Basically, as you said, you can't go here and there or ask to cover the story you want. Sometimes they tell you what to cover and what is best for you, otherwise there will be problems, etc. So logistics are very complex, risk assessment is really complex, especially if you are working with a well-known newspaper or broadcaster. There are so many problems to face in order to get the story out of the country and get in as well. But being local in a place in war is completely different. And you think you can understand from the word of Amira before. But we would know, Amira, from you, how this war shaped and also changed your country and also your way of being a photographer inside Yemen. often we say that being a woman, photographer, or journalist in Yemen in the first years of war was better. Because in the checkpoint they don't check you, so it's easier for the security. But at a certain point something happened, and also bad things happened to you, especially once in a day, I remember. So can you tell us more, and to the audience more, the meaning of seeing a conflict exploding in your own land, in your country, and trying also to report it while your heart is worried for everything, and especially for your family, your friends?
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Lorenzo. I just want to tell you something maybe you don't know. I get treated exactly like you. I go to ask permission to work per month. I have to report to give the list of the things I have to photograph, and always somebody gonna be following me, checking my SD card, all. And I have to take permission from everybody in the north, in the south, from everybody. So it's the same. I get arrested with my team. I get stopped in the checkpoints, always. It's the war. Being a woman doesn't change anything. In fact, it makes you more risky because you are a woman. You think you're gonna go with it? No. So, no, it become different, entirely different. Everything you describe, it's everything any Yemeni local photographer would go through. The same. The difference, nobody behind us. Like local, truly, they are not supported by anybody. Like you were sent by your newspaper, but local, no. If you get arrested, you get arrested. So the local, I think they were in really difficult situation for us because it's our land, but we become strangers. We get accused of being a spy in our land. So this is how it was covering the war. Also, I just have to mention another thing because he knows. You know, like in the north of Yemen, you have to get permission from different people, like in the north. And sometimes you have this permission and you show it to the checkpoint and basically they don't know. They just tell you it's fake, it's not. And then you get in trouble with new group, one of the groups. So it become really, really, really strange situation.
Thanks, Amira. We always say, also in other panels here in this festival, how it's important for commission editors or broadcasters to know how difficult it is working in this environment for local journalists. We rely on local journalists, but we put at the same time in a high risk, in a high danger. And Yemen is a tricky place because you don't know who is in charge of certain checkpoints. You can go from Oman to Sana'a and then you find 40 checkpoints as the area you are. Maybe you have tribal leaders, in another area maybe you have Al-Qaeda, in another area you have random people that just want to take you the money in the car and everything and maybe kill you, as is happening often to Yemenis who are traveling from the south to the north just because people are starving and they need money, and then they try to kill others to take all their goods. And this is something absolutely difficult, just to let you know about the environment. Before asking you the next question, Amira, I just want to remind you all in the audience that we can't pick questions from the audience, but we can accept your questions through Twitter. So if you have any question, please send on my Twitter as a private message, and I will be happy to deliver this question to our panelists today. Amira, going into this could be a question that everyone will ask you, but you already said something about being a woman, a local woman. What's the difference? Okay, we understood that as a Yemeni, there's no difference, maybe it's worse being a woman. But women are, there's something that women in Yemen can do, or in certain specific contexts like Afghanistan, which is entering in the core of the life of the women, having access, gain their trust, and through this trust, little by little, trying to find a way to tell stories of women, picturing them, photographing them, etc. So just want to know from you how you try to portray the life of women in Yemen, and also how you try to gain the trust, telling the people you portray that, yes, you're working for foreigners, but you will not show something they don't want to. And also, which kind of imagine of women in Yemen you wanted to deliver outside about life?
I respect when I ask anybody to take their photos, women. I just go with their rules, whatever they are open to be published or not. And so we set the deal. They set me my limits, which I already know, being a Yemeni. There is lots of social, we are a conservative society, and so I know what is the things that I should show and what is the things that nobody from my society would accept for the outsider to see. And that is not being not open, but even for everybody to respect where we come from. And so it happened. I photographed. Is it possible to show the photos? My photos? And so it happens that I photographed a couple of women, but then after the shooting, they contacted me. They were like, if you publish this photo, like my husband, he gonna divorce me. And I'm like, sure. So format directly. So, and I'm not from yesterday, like it has been 18 years. So majority of the women I photograph, it was, we had trust relationship before we start the shooting. It's not even from the first day. It takes time to talk. And for me, maybe we talk more than we do the shooting because it helped me to capture the soul, not just the photos. And it's challenging for me because sometimes I just feel this person was so amazing that I truly, truly feel like glorifying them, but my photos does not show what I was genuinely wanted to do. So I was with this woman from Socotra, and I just had dreams about her. In fact, I went to the art school because I documented this amazing woman for 2 years, and I used to have dreams about her. Dreams as painting that I needed to go to art school to learn so I can paint those dreams.
So capturing the soul of people. This is something sometimes some cultures, photographers are accused of, right? But at the end of the day, I guess it's something that a photographer wishes to do when you portray somebody. So Lorenzo, I would like to ask you, it's a question about the technique, of course, but also the idea of portraying Yemen, even before entering into Yemen. One of the main questions of this panel is how can we combine, can say, the possibility to tell how ugly is this war, as Amir said, so picturing malnourished children and so on, with this sense of beauty, but at the same time trying also not doing so graphic pictures. Which kind of questions you ask yourself before entering to Yemen, and if in this process there was an important role of your commissioning editor in the Washington Post. And just mention Washington Post because it's the most important media outlet. You published something that was awarded. So.
Yeah, in fact, I was there for the Washington Post both times I went. Well, I went 3 times, but anyway, yeah. So before I don't know if you can see the pictures now. Before going, there was a kind of a dialogue between me and my photo editor. My photo editor is called Olivier Laurent, and I work a lot with him. We usually used to plan and think about how to go about the work. This particular work was focused on the humanitarian crisis and the war, but so the problem of what you end up doing when you are documenting a crisis like that is that you are photographing a lot of children and women, and a lot of children who are mostly in malnutrition ward of the hospitals. So sometimes they are in difficult conditions, and so obviously the questions was, well, how can we go about doing that in a sensitive way? There are ways, of course. Usually the better solution is have enough time to spend with the people and try to understand where they're coming from, what's their ideas, and what's really happened before arriving into the hospitals. And also, of course, with children you try to avoid nudity, and you try to, I always said I would like to represent or show the children or the people that are suffering as I would represent my own family if they were in that situation. And it's always difficult to do that. But on the other hand, when I went last year in 2018, there is also the understanding that it is important to take these pictures, and it is important to keep Yemen on the media. And of course, working with the Washington Post, it was a great occasion to like push this story, especially what we did in 2018, because of course because this is an American newspaper, and the Americans have been involved in supporting Saudi Arabia and selling weapons to them, and so often the people who you see maimed and injured were injured by American bombs, and so it was important to show what happened. And again, just to point out, I mean, the humanitarian crisis and partly the famine that was in the country, I mean, the famine that was in country for part of the time, was not something that is natural. It's not something that is related to natural causes. It's related to the fact that a part of the country is being blocked. So the north part of the country, the airlines cannot fly in, the boats cannot bring aid, or at least now a limited amount of aid. The roads are closed, so there was a reason to this humanitarian crisis, to these starving children that you see. Is not something that is just happened because, I mean, this has happened because of the war, and because the humanitarian crisis was used as a tool of war. So going back to the question here, the point was trying to figure out what's the good balance between telling the story. So, I mean, you have to photograph the children, you have to go photograph the war, but at the same time doing it in a way that is respectful for the people that you're photographing. By the way, it's interesting what you were saying before, also about the safety of the people that lives in the country, because I in this case, in the case of Yemen, I'm a photographer that arrives, stay 2 weeks, 1 month, 2 months, and then leaves. But obviously the consequences on what you do, on what you write, on who you represent, who you put on the newspaper, can sometimes happen like time after, and you know, I don't have the luxury of like you have, that you can have like somebody calling you up and say, hey, can you just not use my picture because I'm gone, I'm somewhere else. And I know that because I covered Afghanistan for a long time, and I was living in Afghanistan for a long time. I lived there for 5 years. And so I was kind of like lived in a place where that was covering, so I wasn't the photographer who come and go. In the terms of, unfortunately, Yemen, it's impossible to live there for us foreigners. I mean, I hope you're gonna manage to do that, but because we get a visa that, and it's really difficult for us to get a visa. I can get a visa as an Italian for 3 months, but then I need to leave. While instead in other countries like Afghanistan, I could manage to stay, and there are many correspondents for big newspapers that have been there for many years, while in Yemen, unfortunately, this cannot happen because of the government.
So, well, we understood that it's difficult getting in, staying there in many ways, as locals, as foreigners. And thank you, Lorenzo, for mentioning something related to the humanitarian crisis. Unfortunately, wars became a matter of numbers, and numbers counts. And about Yemen, we know it, because any kind of accountability was crushed completely this year because of numbers. But I would mention some data that maybe you are interested in, that the United Nations has long warned that the war in Yemen has caused the worst humanitarian crisis in the world, as you said. And according to the World Food Programme, about 16.2 million Yemenis, or about the 45% of the total population, are at risk of starvation. Continuing with numbers, the assessment of the loss of life is complex, and the United Nations also estimates that more than 377,000 of people have died as a result of the conflict until the end of 2001. 2021, sorry. So we're not including the 2022. And in a report published at the end of the last year, the Development Programme of Nations, United Nations, claims that about 60% of these deaths are the result of indirect causes, including famine and preventable diseases such as cholera, diphtheria, yellow fever, and the rest was caused by fighting and aid raids. And in all these numbers, children account for the total loss is the 70% of the total deaths. And continuing with numbers, I just want to mention, if you like data journalism, check the Yemeni Data Project, which is a great project run by well-known journalist as Iona Craig, which is one of the guests of this festival. And you will find exactly a lot of data about the losses, the civilian losses during all these years in all the areas of the country, hit by the coalition. So our data is related to the coalition airstrikes, but very useful, so useful to understand also the difference in numbers of attacks and about the losses in all these 8 years. So going back from the numbers to people and souls, because here we're trying to talk about souls and beauty. Amira, before we receive other questions, I remind you, if you want, you can send a private message to my Twitter, which is batgirl74. So I will pick the questions and ask the question to our speakers. You live in Europe. You came to Europe many times before, so you know Europe, you are running your own business, so you are not a refugee. I just want to underline this because I know that that for you is important. And you are trying to do your own business as photographer in Paris. And here there's another thing, another perception, like coming from a country war in Europe where people coming from countries war sometimes are not welcomed. We are seeing now a lot of efforts for people from Ukraine, and we are very happy for that because these people are trying to save their lives from war. What's your perception about how much European people know about this war? What are your feelings, your concerns? What are you trying to do to let the people know what exactly is happening in Yemen, and also how beautiful Yemen is to the people that don't know?
What is happening in Yemen, simply a war in 3 levels. You can say first level, it's civil war, as your media is telling you. Second, global war. And then third, international war. And this is something I'm not sure everybody in Europe or America knows.
And what about the fact that media don't cover too much the war? What do you wish that the people know about Yemen, apart from the geopolitical side, fights, how many governments there are there, nobody's understanding at least, and where are the battles? But what matters about Yemen? What is important to know about Yemen?
We are the hidden want, if this is gonna make sense. We are people with dreams, and we want it alive. But then, in the other side, we become survivor of the war.
Being survivor of the war, outside and inside.
We try.
And inside, we can say. And in the last years, going deeply into the numbers, we know that so many people are destroyed by war in these indirect terms. I think 4 or 5, maybe 1 week ago, I listened to somebody from Yemen, and she told me the difference between 7 years ago and today is that now, mostly everywhere, children are searching into the trash, some pieces of food to survive, but we saw a lot of situations like that in Hajj, which is, in general, it's well known in Yemen as one of the places where famine was before the war. And now in Yemen we see this everywhere. And this is something that this country, it was the country of the Queen of Sheba, that was the country of the beauty and of very honorable tribes, very proud of all their culture and everything, even of their jewelry, right? Is going deeper and deeper in a kind of nightmare. I have a question for you, Lorenzo. Speaking about a country you're coming from, you were in Kabul, I think 2 weeks ago. This is another country with a stunning beauty. All the nature, we can say simple in a way that its simplicity, it's something that you don't find usually in other countries. This is a country where there is a war since ages, but for 10 years, most of 10 years, we disappeared from the news completely, at the point that every time you ask for an assignment in Afghanistan, well, commission editors, I don't say they laugh, but quite a little. And then popped up from the news in August, last August, and now again it's going down the news. So just want to ask you what the difference between Afghanistan and Yemen, in your perspective as photographer, so I'm not asking about the government or the politics, but in terms of trying to catch in the core of the country with a picture, with a series of pictures.
This is a difficult question to answer because it's a really different place. So these are different wars, different places. There is a common thing that is probably Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda was present in both countries. Well, we know that they were there in 2001, and then the Americans did a lot of drone strikes in Yemen, and there was a stronghold of Al-Qaeda there, and there are still elements of Al-Qaeda there, and so I don't know. I mean, it's a difficult question for what's. I think since we are in a journalism festival, I can talk about the story itself. So both countries are important to be in the news. It's important to still talk about this. I think for Yemen, it's always been more difficult to be in the news. It's a country that is far and is not really known. It was a really poor country before the war. There was never a real intervention from the U.S. Army, so that's usually when you have foreign soldiers in a land, it's where the interest of the media is peaked, unfortunately. And what is happening is really difficult to cover. So the fact that it's a difficult place to access and there are less journalists, it usually make it a story that is difficult to feature in the news. And well, Afghanistan is obviously it's always been much easier to work in. That's because the government, the previous government and the new government have not really interaction with the journalists. You just tell them that they are there, but they don't ask you what you do, and so it was much easier country to cover. And of course, it was interesting for the media the involvement of the foreigners, even the Italians, as you guys know, have had soldiers there in Afghanistan. So in terms of coverage, in terms of pushing the story, Yemen has always been more difficult because it's more difficult to access, it's more difficult to report in, and basically you put so much energy in a story that potentially have not so much interest unfortunately for the world, the media. In fact, I think it was what was interesting of the reporting that I did in 2018 and the awards that came out of this is that I think the awards gave kind of visibility of the story. It's a bit strange because a lot of the media in Italy after the Pulitzer, I was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for Photography from the work that I did in Yemen. And the media, the Italian media were really interested on the fact that I won a Pulitzer, but they were not really interested in actually talking about Yemen. They wanted to talk about me, my career, instead of talking about, you know, the pictures, and to the point that many newspapers were asking pictures of me instead of asking a picture of the place that I was actually photographing. So it was a bit weird, but I hope that in a way, kind of like this was part of the push that me and the paper that I'm working for were kind of like to push this story. And again, unfortunately, the only kind of link, the only kind of real interest that the Americans and the Europeans had was the American involvement in Yemen. So Yemen is a place that has been, there were a lot of drone strikes, especially during Obama administration. There were a huge campaign of drone strikes in Yemen to target Al-Qaeda cells in there. But, you know, the idea of who is belonging to Al-Qaeda or who is just a child who's standing by, it's always difficult to assess from a drone perspective. So there was a lot of that. So basically that was what was the interest to the media, and unfortunately people that lives in Aja, that is a really poor place. It's a really difficult place to access. It's in the northwest of the country, and it's a really crazy situation in there. And like last time I was there, it was August last year. Basically, their whole village was living on leaves. They were like taking out the leaves of the trees and boiling it, and that was the only thing that they had to eat. The whole village, not one family, like everyone. So, so when you see that, and when you see, you know, the UN with their big trucks, and you're just like, okay, well, where is the UN? I mean, where are these guys? I mean, it's like you just bring some flour. I mean, but obviously it's more complicated than that, and the work of the humanitarian agency in Yemen is really complicated, and so I don't want to like talk bad about them. I'm just saying that you would expect more.
Well, we'll not get into that, considering the fact that even all the possible kind of data didn't work in the accountability, and well, it's quite difficult to, I mean, for us as reporters to realize and admit that sometimes all our efforts to put everything together in order to find a piece of truth sometimes is neglected and rejected. This is something heartbreaking. We have 7 minutes. At the moment, I didn't receive yet any questions, so please, if you have one, send a private message to my account on Twitter, batgirl74, do it now, otherwise you can ask questions to our speakers outside. But I have one last question for both of you. It's pretty personal. So, Amira, next time, inshallah, when you will get into Yemen again, wish to ask you, what would you like to photograph or report on, something that you never did before, and you wish to do it?
I'm going to reply, but is it possible to show photos from Yemen?
Sure.
Please?
If you can, there is a second video with the pictures of Amira, which is not the one we projected before. So, yes, if we can show the light there.
I already have lots of plans.
Okay, but we don't want to that you reveal the plans, but just something that maybe
But I have
randomly
it
you want
already before I come to Europe. I'm going to be doing films in Yemen for the same woman. Anybody you're going to see, I'm going to do a film about them. I'm going to return again, and we're going to do something journalism, artistic, something beautiful.
So we hope it will be reality and not a dream, of course. I just want to underline that Amira spent a lot of time in Socotra, which is actually this disputed island. Well, it's not disputed because it's not anymore Yemeni, you can say, but where she spent a lot of time before the war started. And actually, when we were gathering against lunch, she said always, "Oh, I have to go to Socotra. Let's see after 6 months." And then she went to Socotra, and that's it. And it's an island, you know, that all photographers they wish to go and
More Italian.
a lot of Italians, it's true. A lot of Italians know well Yemen because of Pasolini movies and documentaries. And but the problem in Socotra is difficult to picture the reality of the people living there. The nature, it's easy, it's in front of our eyes, but people, it's something difficult. And especially the women there, because that tribal system there is very unique, and also the language is different and everything is different. So we can see the picture of Mira. They were back. And the same question to Lorenzo, if you wish to answer. Next time you will get into Yemen, not asking about the plans of the Washington Post and the Olivier, we don't want to reveal it. But there was something that really catch your attention in Yemen, and you didn't have the time, or you weren't allowed to do this story or take these pictures, and maybe you wish to do that.
So basically, I work in the north and the south. Actually, the picture that I showed before, where I actually showing different areas of the country, but I never been to Sada. I never been to the south, to the north, to the real north of the country, the kind of like heartland of the Houthi rebels, and yeah, I think it's the Houthi are a really interesting political movement. They grew a lot in these years and after the revolution, during the war, and now they become something that is completely different to what they were before the war. And so I think I would like to spend some time with them as much as they can let me, because they tend to be a little secretive, especially about the weapons and stuff. So I would like to spend some time with them and do maybe a work about them.
So we want to see all the arsenal that Houthis have. We don't know where exactly, or maybe we could guess. I have a question from Alessandro Balbo. Is wannabe journalist, he said, here in Italy. And it's a question for everyone, but remind you we have just 1 minute, so we have to be, we have to squeeze everything. The question is for everyone: how can a non-photographer improve his ability to see things and show them in the best way, with pictures, but also with words? Well, it's a complicated question, but I don't know if you want to. How? Yes, Amira first and Lorenzo. How can a non-photographer, so maybe with a smartphone, can improve his ability to see things, to understand what to catch? How?
Act as a BB.
Act as a?
BB. Just follow. BB, they are the best who do video because they don't follow rules. They just, whatever that track their eyes, they just go.
So go, not be scared, and follow the flow. And Lorenzo?
Take pictures, take a lot of pictures. I think I learn a lot from the actual process of staying behind the camera and looking at the pictures and looking at the work of masters, and I think it's like the practice and on the ground is the biggest teacher.
So very good suggestions. So thank you for your questions. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring about Yemen portraying violated beauty. Don't forget this war, people in this war, souls in this war, and the beauty trapped and destroyed in this war. Thank you, everyone.